Thank you. Today I'm excited because it's camp day at Eden, and everybody that knows me knows I like camp. And I've got the talent show coming up tonight, like Ellen told us. And yes, please come. We want you to donate, but that's not a requirement. It is a lot of fun. We have new acts this year. We have resurrected acts this year. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun. But Beau is here to tell us about Camp Living Waters and why you should go.
So I got a mic. Am I on? Check, check. I don't know how I'm supposed to follow Ellen. If you just want to come up and be entertaining, I'll sit back down. That's fantastic. I'm going to go ahead and go up here. So we've got a lot to celebrate about what's been happening at camp. So if we could move to the first slide. Well, the real first slide, sorry, that's my bad. A lot has gone on in the last year, and actually, since I started with these slides in January doing my spring and winter church visits, I had to move stuff from the next slide, which is the needs slide, to the already accomplished slide, which is just bonkers. So I just want to go through this list real quick. We put a new dining room on the new roof on the dining room last year. I paid. When I say I'm talking about camp. Camp paid for that roof up front. It was about $12,000 in materials, and by the time the roof was put on, all the donations had come in to replace that $12,000. So that was amazing. New boiler went into the director's house. It had been without a functioning boiler for a couple of years. That was an $8,000 project, and 5 of that came in a single donation last year. We got a new camp car. We upgraded from an 04 Alero to an 09 Ford Escape, and so that might not sound like an upgrade for some of you, but I promise you it was. We saw 33% growth in all of our programmed events last year, which is amazing. If any business set out for 33% growth in one single year, they would be blowing all their numbers out of the water. So that's really good. And then this is a change probably since the last time I was here, which was 2 years ago. We made a change to the way that we do guest groups. All guest groups, outside groups that come in now, have to share our mission. And so we're not doing public schools and stuff. And that sounds like some people, that sounded terrible. Don't we care about the non-believers? The fact is, I didn't have the right to share the gospel with the public school anyway. And so we wanted to make sure that everybody who comes to camp is mission aligned. And so that means, yes, we still welcome her. Am I blinking out? Oh. We want non-believers at camp. That's real. But now when non-believers come by way of being invited by a friend, they're going to hear the truth of God preached. And so that has been a change. So every single person that came to camp last year heard the gospel. Dining room exterior got painted, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but we noticed that it was fading where the sun shone on it pretty badly, so we painted that wall, the one exterior wall. Use your imaginations, people. Then we realized how bad the rest of the building looked. That's right. And then we got a new program introduced. This was our board gaming retreat, and so some of you are going to fall asleep during this part. But we started a board gaming retreat last spring. We had about 30 people, and some of them were there kind of by invitation to try and get some energy to the event. It grew to about 60 people in the fall, none of which were there by invitation only. They were there because of organic natural growth. What surprised me about this was there's a community that we call them the nerd community. It's real, and they actually find their community around the board gaming table. They may find, what do you call it, halftime? Where shaking hands and you have to talk to people might not come so easily, but they find that community around the board gaming table. And we have really, really been impressed. We had a testimony. Somebody emailed us and told us how important it had been for her to be at that. I swear I'm blinking out. Right. Yeah, see? She came to the event, and when she first got there, she was pacing on the porch of Jack Pine because of the social anxiety that she experiences. By the end of the weekend, she was a little late in getting picked up by her ride. She hung around for 2 hours and talked with me and Emma, my intern, for just 2 hours about the weekend that she had. She met her boyfriend that weekend. We didn't know that at the time, but she met somebody. She started a group called Christian Introverts, something. I've got the acronym wrong. But she has been meeting needs of other introverts who find those face-to-face contacts. So it's just been amazing. I just want to play board games with people, right? Up in Luther, people are scarcity. There's not a lot of them. I just want to play board games. It turns out this was meeting a significant need that we didn't know. So, that was a new program. We needed to put a new roof on Jack Pine, and we had been applying for grants, and before we even had quotes in for the roof, $20,000 came in. It turns out the final quote was for just a little bit more than that, and that roof is fully funded. That's one of them moved from the next slide to this slide. And finally, there's a lot to happen in 1 year, am I right? 2 years ago when I was here, I was probably begging just to help keep the doors open. This is a lot. A group decided that they wanted to upgrade all the audiovisual stuff in Jack Pine, and all of that money has come in, and all of the stuff has been purchased and delivered. So we've got a 70-inch monitor, two 55-inch monitors, speakers, amps, and a bass amp to all get hung and installed, and it's going to be a revolutionary experience in Jack Pine for us. So all that has happened literally in the last year. I haven't been here in 2 years, so I don't know what happened before that. Finally, and most importantly on this slide, we turned a corner. Camp Living Waters turned a corner in the last 2 years. Seriously, 2 years ago, I was probably saying, if you have money to spare, we can use it. Like, it was desperate, and I'm serious. Cash flow is wonderful. I have board members who have been around for over 30 years that are saying we are better off than we've ever been. And so now it gets tricky because I'm like, I still want your money, people, but we are no longer in a place. We're actually looking towards dreaming now, and not where we've been and barely keeping the doors open. And so that's an amazing place to be. I've been there for almost 6 years now, and it has been a run. I can switch to a handheld. I came in the spring of 2019, and then that thing happened in 2020. The virus that shall not be named happened. And so that was just a major speed bump, and now we're turning a corner. Attendance is up on our summer camp to pre-2019 numbers. And so praise God for his provision. I say the joke that it's not my stunning good looks and charisma, it's God's provision. So this slide's actually out of date. I could use about one or two more staff applicants, specifically people who would be willing to be trained as lifeguards. And so if you know a young person that doesn't know what they're doing with their summer and would benefit from a summer at camp, please send them to me or my interns or the website. We'd love to talk to them. I am trying this year, now that we get to dream about where we're going, we're looking for 1 or 20 new monthly, not from this church necessarily. If there's 20 people here that want to get on board, my job is done, and I'll stop putting this on the slide. But we are looking for people who would be good for a monthly commitment of $50 to $100. I know the radio stations always do this. If 20 people called in the next hour, our job would be done. I started doing the math. Holy cow, that's thousands of dollars a year, and that's tens of thousands of dollars a year that really pushes us to dreaming about the updating of facilities, the adding of program. We are looking to add a blob this summer. We don't have a full-size blob. We're looking to add one. This is the kind of thing that we don't have to go out begging when people just partner with us on a monthly basis, because cash flow increases and then we get to do more dreaming. And the last part, we can skip the board and I are dreaming because I just talked about that. This is the part that I have a confession. When I was a kid in church and we had missionaries or not, nonprofit organizations come, they would do this, and this is going to be a caricature of it. It would be like, money, 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 money. Oh, and if you could pray for us, right? And as a kid, I remember thinking it felt really disingenuous. And now I'm in charge of a ministry. And I understand that it wasn't disingenuous. What I have realized is, yeah, the financial stuff is important. And I think that me and my staff, we can give guests an excellent experience. We can set the table. We can make good food. We can try and create good program. We can hire good speakers. That's a thing we can do, right? I cannot give my guests a life-changing experience. What made me think that I could, right? Please pray for every camper and adult guest that comes to Camp Living Waters. No matter how hard we try on the excellent experience side of things, God is going to give them the life-changing experience. And so it's not disingenuous. For other missionaries that come, just let you know, I'm standing where they're standing. It's not disingenuous. They meant it. And now I understand we can't do what we do without your prayer support. So that's everything on the side of Camp Living Waters. Thank you for your support. I do receive, in case you don't know, the missions, you guys have a missions committee that makes these decisions. So your missions committee has decided to support us monthly, and I really, really appreciate that. That has been faithful giving that helped us survive the hard times and now go into the, thriving times. I don't know what to call them. We haven't been here long enough. So, all right. Next slide, I'm going to go ahead and shift gears here and attempt to teach from God's Word. So, I love stories and I love movies, and I used to love TV. I don't as much. Actually, as a kid, my family called me Game Show Beau because I watched a lot of TV. I love when I'm listening or watching or reading a story when I see foreshadowing come to fruition, or in a movie when a Hollywood star has done one movie and then they show up in a different movie and they kind of make a nod to that other role that they played. I'm going to talk about an example, and this is going to get a little convoluted, so stick with me, but is anyone familiar with the show Smallville? There we go. Anybody remember the show? This is a show about Clark Kent, a.k.a. Superman, when he was in high school and as a young adult. And in that show, John Schneider played Jonathan Kent, Clark Kent's earthly father. Some of you may know John Schneider from, next slide, The Dukes of Hazzard. He was Beau Duke, right? One episode of Smallville, Tom Wopat, next slide, who played Luke Duke, showed up and did an almost full episode cameo. Okay? Stick with me. I promise it's worth it. He played the character Jack Jennings. That's him from Smallville. He showed up on his cameo in Smallville in a, next slide, 69 Dodge Charger. That's actually a General Lee painted blue for modern sensibilities. Right. Okay, next slide. His character's name was Jack Jennings, which is a nod to Waylon Jennings, the person who wrote the theme song for the Dukes of Hazzard. Why did I just bring that up? That's a really, really good question. I love Easter eggs, right? And so for Dukes fans watching Smallville, this was the best Smallville episode ever because you had all this stuff. There's actually a moment where John Schneider, Beau Duke, gets in the driver's side of the car and he just opens the door and gets in, right? Tom Wopat walks around to the other side and climbs through the window. And you're like, what on earth, right? John Schneider goes, what are you doing? And Tom Wopat goes, that door's never worked, right? That's, for anybody who had not seen the Dukes but was watching Smallville, none of this made any sense, right? So, incidentally, my brother's name is Luke, so Beau and Luke Graf really thought Beau and Luke Duke were fairly cool as kids. So, if some of you fell asleep, I apologize. The slideshow was supposed to help that. What's the point? Why talk about Easter eggs in a television show? For me, Easter eggs foreshadowing mashups of different literary or cinematic universes. These references and storytelling tropes make our hearts skip a little. While I was preparing for this, I rewatched part of that episode on YouTube, and it was like I was seeing it for the first time. It was so much fun to see Tom Wopat and John Schneider together again. Are we as Christians open and available to that same experience when God does it in his word? Did you know that God does Easter eggs and throwbacks and universe mashups in the Bible? If we can be moved by stories in literature, movies, and television, can we allow ourselves to fall in love with the story that is infinitely more in every way than any other story? Today, I don't have two hands. We're going to be exploring John 1 through 18, very familiar passage. And for those of you who love Easter eggs, buckle up. I'm going to read all of this. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, but the darkness has not understood it. There came a man who was sent from God. His name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning that light, so that through him all men might believe. He himself was not the light. He came only as a witness to the light. The true light that gives light to every man was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who received him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision or a husband's will, but born of God. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. John testifies concerning him. He cries out, saying, "This was he of whom I said, he who comes after me has surpassed me because he was before me." That's a weird sentence, by the way. From the fullness of his grace, we have all received one blessing after another. For the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God, but God, the one and only, who is at the Father's side, has made him known. In the beginning, clearly, this is a direct reference to Genesis. As John introduces us to the God-man Jesus, he takes us back as far as we can go. I suspect that many of the people in this room could quote Genesis 1:1 and John 1:1 from memory. Is it any wonder that God put together such a compelling story that though separated by thousands of years, the beginning still matters infinitely? So in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Do you remember a time when people said, oh, if you're trying to introduce someone to the Bible and they're unfamiliar with it, tell them to read the Gospel of John? I did that once. A friend of mine, John, who worked with me, was unfamiliar. I said, start with the Gospel of John. And then just for kicks, I went back and read the Gospel of John. I said, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word. This doesn't make any sense at all. It's a weird one to start with. The word here, word, is the word logos. This is fascinating. Logos is the noun that means word, speech, message, account, divine utterance, or all wisdom and understanding. This is to say that in the beginning was the utterance of all wisdom and understanding. The utterance of all wisdom and understanding was with God, and the utterance of all wisdom and understanding was God. The utterance that God was trying to give us, even in the very beginning, was Jesus. In creation, God acted by speaking. In many mythologies, there's some story about how the universe came into being. But in our story, God spoke, and Jesus is referred to as speech itself. So we have Jesus Christ as the word or the utterance of all wisdom and understanding. Speech, he spoke in the beginning. Next, we see Jesus called the light and then the life of men. In verses 4 through 9, in him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. I'm not actually going to read the rest of that. I want to look at specifically what Christ is called in 4 and 5 and 9, the word light. What was the first thing God spoke into creation? The light, thank you, right? So now we have another Easter egg or a throwback to Genesis. God spoke, Jesus is speech. He created light, Jesus is the light. Radiance to illuminate all things that created, but Jesus is the light or radiance to illuminate something else. In verse 9, he's called the true light, and I promise this is the last of my Greek study. I'll tell you, the internet makes you feel like you're an expert in ancient languages. It was kind of fun. The word true here means made of truth. I don't even know the implications of that. He's the light that is made of truth itself, and the life and the source of the light and life. Jesus is the light itself and the life itself, and he is the source of the light and the life. He was there in the beginning. Okay, sorry, I have to skip a little bit. There is something specific as the light in creation illuminated all of creation. Jesus is a special illumination, and we're going to get to what Jesus illuminated in a bit. But back to Easter eggs. Jesus was and is co-equal with the Father and the Spirit before creation and was instrumental in all of creation. He is all wisdom and understanding, the Word. He is illumination that made illumination that is made of truth itself, the light, and he is the life itself, physically and eternally. Right now, as we're looking at John and how he tied it back to Genesis, this should be us right now. Slide. That, right. My interns are Photoshop masters. Do you see it? Do you see what John did in pointing us back to Genesis? This story is infinitely intertwined. All right, the Word and light and life became flesh and dwelt among us. Did you guys see the movie, The Best Christmas Present Ever, when it was out in December? Raise of hands, some of you, maybe? Okay. I'll try not to do too many spoilers, but I'll try. There was this family who had never been in church, and they find themselves wrapped up in somehow they got themselves involved in a Christmas pageant. And because they had never heard, they didn't even know what a Christmas pageant was, the woman leading it reads the Christmas story out of Luke, right? And these kids, having heard it for the first time, this little girl, she's like, why didn't they find a room in the inn? Somebody should give up their bed. She's angry. Another kid says, who's going to get Herod? He's angry at Herod, and justice needs to be served, right? They heard it for the first time, and the story was moving. to these kids? Can we allow the Word of God move us in this way? We've read it a million times. And sometimes, you guys watch The Chosen? The Chosen has brought things to life for me. You know, it's hard making a show about the Bible without treading on heresy. I get that. But it has brought some things to life for me. Jesus was a real man, and he traveled with 12 men. And we think that always went well. They were bound to fight, right? So can we open our eyes to this story? Can we freak out a little bit about what God has done in his story? We can go away from that slide because I want to stare at that for the rest of the service. So now as we read, the Word became flesh, maybe we can pretend for a moment that we're not familiar with the story. If all we were familiar with was the Old Testament, what would we think when we read that Eve would crush the head of the serpent? And now the Jesus story is being read to us. What would we think that the Savior was going to be born in Bethlehem to a virgin when we read this story? What would we think that there would be a messenger sent before? Or that he would be the actual Son of God? What would we think? Would we be amazed if we read it for the first time? That all these things that we're familiar with in the Old Testament found their fruition, right? They were tied together in this one person. All right, so we've done Easter eggs. And now the plot twist, right? This is a storytelling trope. The Word became flesh. The divine utterance of wisdom, the light and the source of light, the truth and the source of truth, the life and the source of life became flesh, God with us, Emmanuel. And Jesus, who is all of these things, didn't just become flesh, but he was born to poor parents in a worse than poor environment. Who among us would willingly lay their baby in a feeding trough? Jesus, in humility, left the presence of the Father. That was a big step. In humility, was born to a poor family. In humility, and this one just caught me when I was preparing for this, was born a Nazarene. I'm serious. He could have been born in Jerusalem, but he wasn't. He opted to be born on the wrong side of the tracks. In humility, was born in a literal barn and laid in a feeding trough. How would you feel about a hero in a story coming up from nothing in order to become something? Would it make your heart beat faster? Rocky Balboa? Right? My son we just watched Rocky again. He's like running up and down the driveway and like punching the air. I'm serious. Football team, and remember the Titans. Anybody? Get your heart beating a little bit. Jamaican bobsled team. John Candy gets our heart beating a little bit. No, the other guys. What about Herbie, the VW Beetle? Right? This is the greatest underdog plot twist story ever. Does it get our heart beating like those stories do? The point is that the Father sent the Son to live as we live in the greatest plot twist ever. In becoming flesh, he made himself nothing, taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men, and being found in human form, he humbled himself and become obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. At every turn, Jesus chose humility. And then, in the greatest comeback story ever, he was raised. There's no greater comeback story than coming back from the dead. Incidentally, is it any wonder that the stories we like most reflect this story? Right? Rocky is out for the count, and he comes back every time. Like, when does he stop being the underdog? Right? Rocky is almost coming back from death when he gets up for the 14th time and wins. We like it because it's reflective of something bigger and more eternal. Something hit me that Jesus left the glory of the Father when he became man, and then he died. And I believe he said to the thief on the cross, "Today you will be with me in paradise." I believe that he was in the glory of the presence of the Father again, and he left the glory of the Father a second time. That's something, people. That's crazy. Who among us would be willing to leave the literal presence of God twice? I said earlier I was going to talk about what Jesus, the light, illuminates. And in verse 12, we see it. But to all who did receive him, who believed in his name, He gave the right to become children of God. In verse 12, we see the gospel presented for the first time in the Gospel of John, that Jesus illuminated the path of reconciliation. That was special illumination. That was the light that he was and the thing that he was back the truck up. No heresy this morning. The reason he became a man was to illuminate that path for us. I was told by my pastor to have one bottom line to sum this up, but I don't know how to do that. So I've got two bottom lines. The first being, this is a story infinitely bigger, infinitely better, infinitely more complex and intertwined, and it deserves our attention as it draws us closer to the author. I didn't get this before I did this sermon. I was blown away at all the connections, and I'm excited to dive deeper and find more. Bottom line number 2, and probably more importantly, are you and those you know aware of and reconciled to the author of this amazing story? And now I have to shift gears again because I forgot something. Back to the Camp Living Water side of things. I am trying to breathe life into a program that has struggled, and so I'm sorry to end my sermon this way. We have an off-roading weekend called Wide Open. If you or someone you know is remotely interested in off-roading, please come talk to me. I would like to remove barriers to getting people to that event, to just give it a try. It is a missional event. We've got sessions and worship and stuff. But that was one thing that I meant to mention, is I could use your help in trying to get people for this event. I think that it has a lot of potential. I think that it can meet a need, but we are struggling to breathe life into it. So thank you very much. Dan, I think you were going to come up and pray, so I mean, we can pray twice, but I'll leave that to you.